All right, welcome back to ABC 7 at 4. The Hunt Institute for Global Competitiveness at UTEP, they're holding a speaker series on trans-boundary security issues. The Hunt Institute wants to help foster the economic and social well-being of communities on the Paso del Norte region. And tonight they have a guest speaker, Ioan Grillo. He's a New York Times writer and columnist who's reported on the Mexican and Latin American illegal drug trade since 2001. He's authored books Gangster Warlords, Drug Dollars, Killing Fields, and the New Politics of America, and El Narco, Inside Mexico's Criminal Insurgency. So thank you so much for joining us. He joins us now, Ioan Grillo. I understand that you're in Mexico City right now.
Yeah, I'm based in Mexico. I've been based there since 2001, yeah.
And your story is incredible. You've actually embedded yourself with cartels and gangs, and one of the most nefarious parts of Latin America. Tell us about that.
Well, I think like many journalists covering this story, we realized after some years we couldn't only rely on what we found from the police or from politicians. We need to talk to gang members themselves. Yeah. And you find this issue not just over here in Ciudad Juarez, but in many parts of Latin America and the Caribbean. I mean, in El Salvador is now way more violent than Ciudad Juarez was, in Honduras, in Jamaica, in Caracas. So, I started off going into prisons to talk to many cartel members, and then outside of prisons as well. And often you talk to the young men, some women, but mainly young men, who often join these groups when they're teenagers and commit many murders, often more than they can count, commit quite evil crimes, but as people will often show you a more human side to them. And they'll say, you ask them, you say, look, I want to document why you are in this lifestyle, why you are committing this kind of mass murder. And they will say, well, look, I was recruited when I was 12, 13 years old. And
as you're doing this, are you ever in harm's way? Have you ever had experiences like that where you could have been seriously injured or killed?
Well, there's been various times, yeah. I mean, one time I was in Michoacan in Mexico, and I was in a place where I was a bunch of guys with quite heavy weaponry who were supposedly linked to the police, but these were people who were hardcore sicarios, as they say, hardcore drug cartel assassins from a certain group. And I was taking photographs of them posing with a bunch of weapons, quite heavy weapons they had. They had these G3 guns that were meant to be used by the military, a lot of grenade launchers. They had grenades strapped to them and bullets strapped to them. And they were saying, where am I from? And, do I like taking crystal meth? And then one guy accused me of being an agent for the DEA. And said he claimed that his brother was arrested by a journalist, a DEA agent pretending to be a journalist. And I said, look, I'm not even American. I'm British. And they were unsure, and
that's got to get your heart pounding, though.
Yeah. And the guy said, eventually I showed him my website that I'm a journalist, and they looked at it and they relaxed a bit. The guy said if he saw me again, he would shoot me in the head.
Oh my goodness.
So yeah.
In all of your research, I found that you believe the criminal kingpin is becoming the norm. It was right in front of your eyes, a new breed of the criminal kingpin. What do you mean by that?
I like to talk about them being part CEO, part rock star, part terrorist. Like, if you look at the figures of these criminal kingpins today in Latin America and the Caribbean, and who are these people? On one side, they're held up as these big villains, these kind of super criminals that we're seeing about in the news. On the other side, they get this kind of rock star status, and with people like El Chapo and Sean Penn meeting El Chapo and shaking his hand, we see this kind of rock star status for them. The other side, they're running immense amounts of money. We're seeing billions and billions of dollars, and this is linked to the drug consumption here in America, where the White House says that Americans spend about $100 billion every year on crystal meth, heroin, marijuana, and cocaine. And the other side, they're running these paramilitary style groups of killers who really threaten governments, who really can kind of take areas and become the de facto bosses in certain territories in these places.
And as you're witnessing all this, would you say that we're safer now? I mean, the war on drugs has been going on for so long. Are we safer now or less safe?
Well, if we talk about the war on drugs, we often go back to the time when Richard Nixon declared a war on drugs back in 1971. And back then he said he would like to achieve the complete abolition of heroin and these drugs from American life. They just did not exist. They were not there. That obviously has not been achieved. Drugs are everywhere right now. I mean, one time I drove into Phoenix trying to find people who were selling crystal meth for a documentary. It took me about 10 minutes to find people who were selling crystal meth. And I was just driving in there, not knowing anyone. Simply went to the central square there and started asking people. So we've definitely got many drugs, and I think around many parts of Latin America and the Caribbean it's worse than ever. Very tragically, while in many parts of the world there's less murders, in Latin America there's been more over the last 10 years. It's increased by 11%. Over a 10-year period, across Latin America and the Caribbean, there's been 1 million homicides. So really, the war on drugs approach, the prohibition, hasn't worked. Tomorrow in the United Nations, there's going to be a talk by many people, heads of state and other people, about reviewing this drug policy and looking forward. And I think we have to say the old drug policy hasn't worked. We have to try and build a new drug policy, but then there's hard questions about exactly what that should be.
Oh my goodness, I could talk to you all afternoon. And if you're interested in learning more about Ioan's journey and all his books, he has a new book out, Gangster Warlords, go ahead and go to UTEP 5:30 to 8 at the El Paso Museum of Art, the Energy Auditorium. Admission is free. You are asked to RSVP at Hunt Institute at utep.edu. Thank you so much for joining us. We appreciate it.
Thank you much. Pleasure.
And we'll be right back after a short break.